Right, so hello everyone. Thank you all for being here. Um, I'm Isabella. I'm the YA curator and events coordinator at Buffalo Street Books in Ithaca. Um, so I'm a big YA reader, and I love books that deal with difficult subject matters and that open up readers' minds and teach them about subject matters that they're not very familiar with. And one of my favorite things doing at BSB is being able to work with outside organizations to bring you these events. And I'm so glad that we're once again working with the Advocacy Center for another YA event. And so my co-moderator today is Leah, who is the intern at the Advocacy Center. And both of us are huge fans of the book What Unbreakable Looks Like by Kate. Is it Kate McLaughlin or Kate McLaughlin?
Kate McLaughlin.
Kate McLaughlin. Great. Okay.
That's my grandmother's maiden name, and that's how she always pronounced it. So
I just have to make sure I was doing that correctly.
Mind anyway. I'm not precious.
Yeah, I have a very long last name, so people. Anyways, I'm so glad that we are able to have a conversation with Kate about her incredible book that just came out towards the end of June. And so I think we're going to get started. Kate, can you maybe say a few words about yourself? And then for those who haven't yet read the book, can you give like a quick pitch for What Unbreakable looks like?
So Kate McLaughlin's not my real name. I'm not going to tell you what my real name is, but bonus points if you know it. I've been writing for quite a long time, but recently I took a bit of a change of direction, hence the name Kate McLaughlin, and wanted to start writing some different books. I wanted to start getting into some what I call issue books. And so I live in Connecticut with my husband and our 4 neurotic cats. We're originally from Canada, so we're transplants. And so we're the only ones of our families down here. Everybody else is back in Canada, so that makes it hard sometimes, especially now that the border's closed. And the book, What Unbreakable Looks Like, is about a teenage girl who was sex trafficked, and the beginning of her journey to having some sort of, I hate to say the word normal, but to her having a healthier life and future.
Yeah. It's a great way to put it. So what drew you to the topic of human trafficking, of sex trafficking in the first place? It's a very important issue. I think it's one that people sometimes even kind of forget that's happening right here in America. Right under our noses.
That's been something I've been getting a lot in emails from people or messages. They're saying, "Oh my God, I didn't know it was such a big problem here." Let me tell you, in the U.S., trafficking is second only to the drug industry. And that is because they use drugs to control the girls, which
there's a great line about that in the book.
Yeah. So it is a huge problem, and it's happening everywhere. And a lot of people think that it has to be, that the kids are locked up, or the girls, women, boys even are locked up, or they're actually kept prisoner. And sometimes it's a bit more complicated than that. But how I became interested in it was, as I've been getting older, I've just been getting angrier at things that happen to girls and women. And one day my husband, who is a very lovely, like, beta kind of guy, came home from work and he said, "I just heard this story on NPR about human trafficking in the US. And actually, I think it was the US and outside, because it was a story about Love 146. And so he told me about what was going on, and it made me so mad. So I was like, okay, I need to write about this, obviously. And I had a friend who was a death examiner, for a death investigator for Connecticut. And she said to me, "Oh, when I told her I wanted to write a book about trafficking, she said, I know a state detective who worked in trafficking. It was just like, like fell into my lap. So I got in touch with her, and then she and I started talking about the industry, and that was some interesting, scary stuff that she told me. And then it just led to me getting actually deeper and deeper in. She asked me to mentor one of her girls that she'd gotten out of the life, who was in a institution. And so I started mentoring her, then almost adopted her and didn't. And it went from there. But I'm not even saying that, I'm not saying this to brag, because it's not something to brag about, but I think I know as much about trafficking as anybody who hasn't been trafficked can. And I have the lucky perspective of having known very closely somebody who was trafficked, somebody who's tried to save people who were trafficked, social workers, and then been someone who has become very attached to somebody who was trafficked. And then when it becomes a personal thing like that, it's it just becomes a fight that, like the book has been out, the book has been written for quite some time, but this is something I'll continue to fight against for a long time.
Yeah. Leah, okay, back to you.
Hi, I'm Leah, and I'm the Advocacy Center intern. So I have the next question. So this question is, within the first few pages of the book, Lex is rescued from the motel where she's trafficked.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of the novel completely focuses on her journey through and to recovery. So we were wondering a little bit about why you decided to choose to focus on recovery instead of any other part of the journey.
Well, I think that there are some flashbacks.
Yeah.
As you read the book, there are little snips from Poppy's life in the hotel. I have to, the honest answer is that I just wanted to focus on something a bit more positive. Because frankly, Lex got the best possible outcome there was in all possible universes, right? And that's what I wanted to focus on, because I wanted, if any girl that was, or boy, or anyone who was in that situation picked up that book and read about it, I just wanted them to have some hope. And so that's the base of it right there, is why I decided to focus on the recovery and finding a home and finding her people and friends and all that good stuff. Rather than focus on the bad, because really, quite frankly, the bad it's very bad.
Yeah, that I was hoping you were going to say something like that in answer to that question.
Well, yes, I already have people writing reviews saying this book, oh my God, these horrible scenes in the hotel, or these flashbacks, or these horrible things, and I think even a couple sounded like they couldn't believe that it would actually happen. And
mm-hmm.
and when I see people say that, I just want to kind of give them a hug and thank them for being so sweet in the head that that they don't think people could be this horrible to each other. Because nothing I put in that book was worse than any of the stories I heard.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, you know what? These girls, these boys, these kids, they all just deserve that hope.
Yeah, they absolutely do.
Yeah.
So in terms of recovery, privilege is a significant element. As you were saying, she kind of has the best possible outcome.
Yes.
Lex gets a fancy rehabilitation facility with canopy beds and horses, and when she goes home, it's to her wealthy aunt and uncle in a really nice neighborhood where she has a puppy. But her friend Daisy from the motel ends up going back and has to go to the mental hospital down the street from her facility, and then she ends up going back into the life.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk a little bit about how privilege is instrumental to recovery and how you incorporated that topic into the novel?
Sure. Okay. So obviously there is some privilege, just the fact Lex being white, and her aunt who comes to her, well, and I don't want to say her rescue, but her aunt who is there for her being white. There's a certain amount of privilege there. But I will tell you that actually Daisy being sent to the mental hospital, that actually wasn't a privilege or a race thing. That was based on something that happened to one of the girls that I interviewed. And it's based on whether or not there's somebody there. Now, if Lex's mother had come for her, well, she would have ended up right back with Mitch. If Lex's mother had said that she didn't want her and there hadn't been Aunt Chris, Lex would have ended up in a completely different situation, because one of the girls that I knew, she got into some trouble after what happened to her after being trafficked, and her father just basically said, I don't want her. Like, I can't deal. And that's how she ended up in it's sort of, the facilities, I don't know if you've been to one, but they're kind of like mental facilities, and they're a little bit like juvie, and they're a little bit like detention homes, but they are, treatment facilities, but they're state run, and so that's what Daisy ended up in. And I wanted to have that, because so many of those girls get forgotten, and they do just get left aside. And so I was like, well, I want to put a focus on that. And because then, of course, they do just sometimes end up going back, because if their family doesn't want them, if they get released, or they'll run. One of the girls I knew, they took her to get her driver's license, and the mental facility she was in, took her, dropped her off so she could do her license. And when they came back to get her, she'd run. And she went straight back to a former associate. So it's, if I wasn't going to give Lex that kind of darkness in her life, I needed to have other characters that had it happen to. So poor Daisy, who I loved Daisy because she was such a fighter. She was such a tough kid. Had been on her own for quite a while. So nobody was there for Daisy, and that's what happened.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I've definitely noticed that it was added into some other characters. So I'm going to send it back over to Isabella now.
Yeah, so at the beginning of what you just said before, you talked about, the privilege of Lex being white. And that kind of leads to my next question, which is that, I think both of us were, I think I've read the book twice now, but I think, upon rereading it, I was reading it in the context of, the Black Lives Matter movement. And I was especially drawn to several parts in the book in which race was discussed. It's discussed at multiple points, but there's a particular moment that's early on in the book, and it's when Jamal asks, who's Lex's uncle, he's Chris's husband, but he asks if he makes Lex uncomfortable because he's a man, or if it's because he's Black. And could you talk sort of a little bit about the choice to make Jamal Black and how race intersects with other issues in this book?
At first, when I read this question, I was like, because making Jamal Black wasn't even really a choice. Like, okay, so I don't know if you're right, but I've been this way ever since I was a kid. The characters kind of pop into my head with this fuzzy kind of picture. And so when I pictured Chris and her husband, like before they even had names, I pictured this cute little redhead in kind of a cashmere sweater and her tall, dapper Black husband. Like that's just how they came to me, was like that. So I don't think he was a conscientious decision. But when I thought about it, again, you're right in terms of privilege and race and whatnot, because obviously I'm a white woman. I don't know what it's like to be a person of color and have those struggles. So I chose to write the book from the viewpoint of a white person. I also, though, was going to be very careful about the fact that I wanted to address some stereotypes. And the first one of that was so making Mitch white, the pimp white, was a conscious decision, because there is a horrible stereotype in this country when people think pimp, and that it's not true. I mean, certainly, there are pimps of every color and gender. Like during the research for this book, I discovered that there are high school boys who are recruiting. There are girls who are running trafficking rings. There are full-grown women who are running trafficking rings. Being the kind of creature that profits from selling others is not exclusive to one gender or one race. And so I wanted to tackle that. And then I guess I probably did get thinking that maybe there was just a lot of white in the book, and the world is not a lot of white. And I used to live in Middletown, where the book is set. And because it has Wesleyan University, or Wesleyan College, it's got just an amazing, diverse neighborhood, especially downtown. So I'm like, I wanted to reflect that. And yeah, but it wasn't necessarily, at first, it wasn't a conscientious thing, but then I guess later on, it kind of became more of one.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I mean, I think that the social commentary in the book is just so excellent in terms of just so many things. I mean, you tackle so many different topics there. And it's really great to see the diversity. And I know, like, I mean, I'm not native to Ithaca. I go to Cornell. And so I know that, like, what you're saying about how the town is so diverse because of the university, and how, when you have so many different kids from all over the world there, that really reflects the diversity of the world. And that leads to, speaking of, some of the kids in the town, my personal favorite character in the book was Zach. I think Lee and I both
good. He was
Zach is our favorite character.
Yeah.
Zach is just, we all want a Zach so badly. And he's such a great guy, where others would run screaming in the opposite direction or take advantage of Lex's past, the way, I don't even remember the other guy's name who she meets after leaving him. Yeah, Mike, because he's a horrible human being. But unlike Mike, Zach stands his ground. He respects her all the while. And I want to know, like, who your favorite character was to write overall. And was that your favorite character? Was your favorite character to write also your favorite character?
Zach is my, perfect guy. And I will have to admit, because he's not here to hear, Zach is based a little bit on my husband, like, not the looks wise, because Zach is like basically a young Jason Momoa in my head. But when I met my husband, I was in my early 20s, and I was having a lot of, like, anxiety attacks. And so I felt like I was a little nutty. And excuse the term, that's my term, that's how I personally felt. It's not a reflection on how anybody else who has those problems feels. But he had been a psych major in university. So when we met, I kept saying to him, oh, I feel like this or whatever. And he was incredibly patient, because he knew what the root cause was. He knew it was the anxiety, right? And so he knew it wasn't permanent. And so he was just incredibly patient and kind. And when I would get really jacked up, would bring me, like, are you familiar with those Ensure or the shakes, like the meal replacement shakes kind of thing that you can get? They usually give them to old people. But I had gotten so that I couldn't even eat, and he would bring me these care packages of stuff to take care of me. And until him, I hadn't even known that men that sweet even existed. And so his mother is also based very loosely on mine. My mother wasn't a prof, but she did have debilitating arthritis and was a very kind of nosy, blunt, sweet woman. And so when she started forming in my head, I was like, what kind of guy would my mother have raised? And then wanted to combine a bit of Steve, my husband, with that too. So, and then I thought, you know what, all this stuff that this girl's been through, I can give her the fantasy guy. Because the fantasy guy is the one she's going to run screaming from. You know, he's going to scare her the most, and a nice guy.
Yeah, so going off of that, you know, also just be, I've been like with friends, you know, rereading Twilight, the Twilight Saga, and like kind of critically reading it in preparation for the new book. And, you know, we're just like, why were we obsessed with this relationship? Like it's awful. And it's a relationship that so many, you know, teen girls like base their fantasy guy off of. So what are some of your favorite, you know, relationships in books that are healthy the way that Zach and Lex's relationship is?
Oh, gosh. I have to go back a bit, I think. Oh, okay. There's an old book. It's Jane Austen. It's Persuasion. I don't know if you've read that. If you're a lit major, probably. But it was about this couple who wanted to get married when they were young, and then her family persuaded her to say no. And then he comes back years later, and he's made a fortune, and you know, all this kind of stuff. And it's I love those reunion stories. I'm trying to think of some YA books that I've read recently, and of course my brain is going completely blank for it. But you know, in regards to Twilight, I have a theory, if you don't mind me going back to that a bit, because when I first started off in this business, I wrote romance. Okay, so there's this thing about the alpha hero, right? And I think the problem with Twilight, when you get to a certain age, so I think Twilight is very popular when you're a certain age, under like 20, and it's very popular with a certain age bracket over 30, 35, right? And that's because it's that fantasy thing when you're young, because Edward is so broody and dramatic.
Yeah.
So you're attracted to that. And when you're older than that, in a certain age, you're kind of like, you know, he's just the fantasy alpha dude. But when you're in between that, you're kind of like, dude, he's just creepy, right? Because you're reading it with a more realistic expectation.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I'm sorry he's creepy for you now.
I mean, I'm still Team Edward. Like, it's just the memories associated with it. Like, of all my friends, I'm the one who
I wrote vampire
enjoys it the most. But
there is actually, if you're interested in this, sorry, segue, but there is this whole thing. Now, this is going to the extreme, but there is this whole thing about women being drawn to alpha men, right? So there is that thing about being drawn to a man that you know who can protect you, and I'm talking, you know, straight women. But there is a mental illness called hyperistophilia, which is when like these women become attracted to people like Charles Manson and like prison groupies, for lack of a better term, because it's not because there's something necessarily so terribly wrong with them, or that they find they're attracted to the degree of alpha that those men represent. And it's kind of like our natural inclination to be drawn to a partner who can protect and have our back, for lack of a better term, becomes weirdly twisted. I wrote a book about it.
Okay. That's great. I would have to like do some more research on that. But
Yeah.
I think, Leah, I think we're back to you.
Like, because you know, you hear about people like Charles Manson and like or when Ted Bundy, I know I'm going way back, way before your day, but
we've seen all the docuseries.
Yes, well, here's the thing, I'm old enough to remember when Ted Bundy was executed, and there were women in love with him. Like there were the women just saying like, oh, he couldn't have done this. And yeah, and watch the Zac Efron movie if you haven't, because I'm actually one of the people that enjoyed that. I thought it went into that whole personal side of things.
Yeah, I remember before I go to Leah, I'll say I remember reading that people were criticizing that particular film for like sort of making him this like handsome, very humble person. And one of the survivors of the one woman who managed to get away was the person who said, I don't mind it at all, because that's what his appeal was. He was the kind of person who, like, if his car broke down, like you could go, like if he approached you, you wouldn't be scared. And like that, and the way that Zac Efron is someone who's
Yeah.
portraying sort of what he was, why people were able to trust him in the first place.
Documentary now with the character that Lily Collins. That she's actually come out and done an interview, and I don't know if you've seen it, but it's like an hour-long conversation, or maybe it's a couple hours, with her and her daughter about what life with him was like. And it's fascinating. And of course, now this is where I tell you, it has actually inspired the current book I'm working on. And
okay, we'll get to that later because we have questions.
But yeah, okay. And you also asked me who my favorite character was to write in the book, and oddly enough, it wasn't Zac. I mean, although he was so sweet, I think the character I was most sympathetic or drawn to was Ivy, Jamie. Because she was the one who didn't get the same chance. And yeah, and I don't know, I kind of fell in love with her parents and her family towards the end. Like for a little while there, I was walking around with her little sister in my head thinking, I got to give this kid a book, but I don't know what I'd do for her. I just want to give her something.
Yeah.
So talking about like relationships and all the unhealthy sorts of relationships that exist in the world, like the ones that Ted Bundy had with his victims. Lex's relationships with characters like Chris, Jamal, Elsa, and Zac are all like super positive and healthy, especially in comparison to her other relationships, such as the ones with her mother, Frank, the girls at the motel, even to some extent, and of course Mitch. So could you talk about the importance of giving Lex a whole community of support instead of just one person?
Yeah, because that's what it takes. These kids who have been trafficked, first of all, you are not going to save them. That's the thing you need to know going into it. But it is exhausting trying to fight the programming that has been done to them. And these people, they know how to do this, and this programming takes hold very quickly. And I guess this is when they talk about how they know who to target in the first place. And they just get so that their whole worth kind of hangs on, I hate to diminish it to this point, but it's almost like they're just like, they know they're worth something if somebody's going to pay for them. And so one person can't fight that. And so you need to have that community. I mean, Chris was there with the love for her, and she did need the love, but then Jamal was more the one who was more more straight talker, and he wouldn't take her crap. He just wasn't going to put up with it. But he didn't treat her like she needed to be coddled really either. He was just like, hey kid, let's watch the movies. Elsa had been there, done that, had been through some stuff herself, and she was just definitely no BS, not going to let this define me. I have control of my life. So then she needed that kind of other girl, and she needed a girl that she could see as a friend, not a rival. And then of course, we talked about wonderful Zac and that kind of thing, because I just wanted to give her this group, this support network, that if nothing else would always be honest with her, because I felt like that's what she needed more than anything else, was just somebody. And so if she freaked out or she did whatever, somebody who would just look at her and go, okay, what was that about? Have some water or whatever. Like, just, okay, so you did that. Let's get back to work. Yeah, because it's very difficult, and one person's not going to pull it off. She needed friends, and then she also needed the adults in her life as well. And she wasn't certainly going to get it from her mother. I mean, her mother's a terrible person, and her mother's is actually a composite of some of the mothers that I encountered during research or heard stories about.
Yeah, I think that having such a community that was there for Lex, totally, like, clearly made the difference in her story. And that's something that felt, at least a lot of this book has felt, reading it has felt a lot more realistic and accurate than other books that I've read while doing this work with the Advocacy Center. Because there are some books that it's like, oh, it takes one person to save somebody. And oftentimes one person can make a difference in somebody's life, but in most situations you really need it, like it takes a village, right?
Yeah, not to give a whole lot of, but you know, I've found out, and I'm still finding out sometimes the hard way. No, one person can't. There's only so much. Yeah, only so much you can do.
Yeah, so I'm gonna send it back over to Isabella.
Yeah. So you've talked a little bit about this and the people you've talked to, but one of the things that is very evident in the book is how Mitch uses manipulation tactics to groom Lex in ways that are very realistic and consistent with those described by trafficking victims. And I'm sure that that's a result of serious research, and
Yeah.
kind of been talking a little bit about the different people you've talked to, but can you talk more about like the type of research you did for this book? Do you watch documentaries? You talk to survivors, you talk to law enforcement officers. It's just
Okay, so I'm actually good friends now with a Connecticut state detective. She and I trade, just go back and forth. And as a writer, and cop is a great person to have on your your contact list. Like, oh my God, what can I do for a bullet wound? So I've become really good friends with a social worker who works within the juvenile justice system. I've met juvenile detention guards, caseworkers, lawyers, most importantly, girls who have been trafficked. I've met psychologists and people that have tried working with them. So yeah, I've come at it from all sides. But the biggest eye opener for me was when I was introduced to my mentee, as I call her, and formed that relationship. I mean, she was 15, almost 16 when I met her. She just turned 19 this year. And so she was in a facility. She'd been in one since she was 13 or 14. And, I had to go and like leave my stuff in a locker to even go visit her, and had to make sure I had no sharps on me, and she was medicated, and there were rules, and, sometimes we could take her out, sometimes we could bring her here. And we did, we got to a point where we were applying for legal guardianship. And she got scared and ran, which was unfortunate. And so then she took off, and I didn't know where she was. And then I got a call from a hospital, and, and then she got picked up, and then she ran again. And then she's in juvie, and then she's in actual prison because she turns 18 and she steals a car. This is the stuff that's been ongoing. And so this is why I say I know that one person can't change it. But from the time that I started writing this book, and then she came along, it was only a couple of months, and it changed drastically. And I don't think I could have done it without her. So as much as sometimes she just drives me crazy, because she really does, because I get frustrated because I just can't make her see just her own worth. Like, it is just so frustrating and upsetting to not be able to make a person see that they're worth more than what they think, but or what they deserve. And because she went into institutions so young, she really has no concept of what the world really is or what she does deserve. So it's an uphill battle. But in terms of research, you didn't get more hands-on than that. And I don't want anybody to think that she was research. I mean, she started out as just, when somebody said, hey, when this detective said, one of my girls likes to write, would you talk to her? That's how it started out. It wasn't anything to do with my book or anything like that. I just said, oh, sure. And so she writes poetry, and that's what we started talking about. And I was helping her with her poetry, and I helped her self-publish a a volume of that. And then we just started getting to know each other, and then she started to open up about things. And she actually was the original beta reader for the book. And I'll never forget it, because it was such praise when she gave me back the manuscript, and it had like food stains and stuff. Like she had this thing was just like destroyed. She just looked at me and she was just like, "You got it. You understand me." And I just thought, oh, that's it. So, the reviews that this book has been getting have been mostly positive, and it's great. There have been a couple trickle in that I'm just like, okay, it doesn't matter, because this book was for her. So, I don't care if anybody else likes it. She tells me I got it right. So
going off of that, I think for all of us watching, are there, any documentaries, any, things that you would further recommend? Because I think some of us are going back into quarantine. Some of us are in the process of like doing 2-week quarantines,
So there is the I Am Jane Doe documentary, which was about the case against Backpage. Tremendous. Just so, like, you'll get so angry if you haven't watched it, but it's so triumphant. I actually fangirled, if you can call it that, one of the mothers in the documentary. I reached out to her on Twitter and said, "I just want you to know, I think you are the most amazing thing ever." and you need to write a book. Because the things she did to save her kid was just, and then they also did a little thing called a little animated movie that Jessica Chastain narrates. It's called Little Red, and it's actually a short movie to kind of educate kids about trafficking, using Red Riding Hood and the Big Bad Wolf as an analogy. What did that one? There was one that the GEMS Initiative out of New York did, but I can't remember the name of it right off the top of my head. I'm sorry. But that was, there haven't been, or there just haven't been a lot of documentaries that I've seen that have been very, somebody's actually putting some information in here. So it's Lynn. That's awesome. Love 146 is obviously an option. There's Polaris. These are different websites and organizations. I haven't seen a lot of documentaries, to tell you the truth, or even a lot of movies or other books. I mean, they're starting to pop up some now, but I'm not seeing a whole lot that really deals with it.
Hopefully someone will adapt this one, because.
Well, if you got any, like, if you know anybody in Hollywood that might want
I do actually.
do a book on trafficking or do a movie, yeah.
I will send it to the managers at my internship.
Because I really think there needs to be more emphasis on it, because like I was saying, I think earlier, that a lot of people have reached out to me saying, I didn't know it was a problem here in the US. I thought that was something that happened
also a problem
overseas, or so
okay, I think go back to you, Leah, for the next one.
Yeah, so really quickly, just before, I did want to point out that Lynn is dropping information into the chat, and the documentary that Rachel Lloyd and Gems did was called Very Young Girls. Yeah.
Yes, I knew it was something girls, and I was like, I'm not going to say something girls. Yeah. It's brutal. There is some very brutal moments in that one.
Mm-hmm.
Just for
my freshman year of high school, there was this project we had to do called like How to Change the World project. We had to pick someone who's like not famous to do like this huge like research paper on, and then this like poster and whatnot. And I did Rachel Lloyd. I remember wanting to do a woman like who was changing the world, and some people were doing Jamie Oliver and like whatnot, and it's insane to me that that I knew who she was at such an early age, and that she's still doing such incredible work.
Yeah, she's trying, man. And she's got a big battle there, because in New York, of course, now that people have been finding out about them, unscrupulous people now, of course, can watch and are targeting, people that are going there, which of course just makes me mad. And she is fighting the good fight. And we actually sent her a copy of the book, but I don't know if she ever read it or not. I would love to talk to her sometime, because just all that she's achieved, she's just amazing.
Yeah, she is so amazing. And the Advocacy Center might be doing a screening of Very Young Girls if we can figure out where our copy of the documentary is. But moving into the next question, the book is separated into two parts, Poppy and Lex. And so when we first meet Lex, she's actually introduced as Poppy, and that's the name that Mitch, her pimp, gave her. And they're technically, Lex and Poppy are the same person. They coexist in the same body, but they are about as different as can be, it seems, often. They have very different responses to things. And Poppy seems to be almost a coping mechanism that tries to protect Lex. And so can you tell us a little bit about these two parts of Lex and how you thought about her character, since she kind of had two different characters as you were writing?
Yeah, I did kind of see them as, obviously they're two halves of the same whole, and you're spot on. And so, like, thank you, because like, I'm so glad that that I made it obvious, I guess, that Poppy is definitely a coping mechanism. One of the things that I learned from my mentee, talking to her, was that she didn't actually know to call it dissociation, but she would tell me about just escaping or going away. And when I would talk to her about things, I would notice that sometimes she had different memories, like of how long, so like one time she ran away, she was gone for 2 days. We all know she was gone for 2 days. We have the police records to prove it. She insists that it was 3. And there's no changing her mind that it was 3. And it's almost like she gets, reality gets a little distorted, and there is such a high degree of dissociation amongst a lot of these victims. And of course, dissociation is a common way of dealing with sexual abuse. And, in very young people, it can eventually lead to dissociative identity disorder, which is a bit of a controversial topic, but so that's exactly what Poppy was. Poppy was the dissociation of Lex, and she was there so Lex could get through what she needed to get through. And Poppy very quickly became the tough, kind of dispassionate, and do whatever needed to be done just to get through.
Yeah, when reading and while I was reading and thinking about Poppy and Lex, I kind of wondered a little bit about dissociative identity disorder and whether that was playing any sort of part, even though, of course, she was never diagnosed with that in the book.
And okay, and I'm because my next book's about dissociative identity disorder. So I can tell you that just frankly, because the fact that the abuse that she suffered did not take place at a young enough age for her personality to fragment. So she does have a dissociative disorder, dissociative identity disorder.
Okay, well, that's a great teaser, and I'm pretty sure Isabella has some, or if one of us has questions later about some of your next projects. But right now, the question is, you're very direct in the details that you include about what was done to Lex and her thoughts. And one of the things that you encourage readers to think about is the role that addiction plays, both in making Lex more vulnerable to Mitch in the first place, as well as a tool that Lex has chosen to walk away from. So will you share about some of the connections between sexual violence and the ways that Lex has numbed herself, including by using drugs and dissociating, and her healing process? Or, yeah.
Yeah, so obviously the drugs were used to keep her complacent, and also to mess with her ability to remember what was going on. So that was great. So of course, staying high then becomes very desirable. And it makes getting through easier. And then of course, then she can just open that door in her head, as I described it, and walk on through and dissociate. Drugs are incredibly common in trafficking. And it's very sad. A girl I knew, before she was trafficked, she, might smoke a little bit. Now, every once in a while, I get a call from her, and she's all done up on crack. And it's horrendous. It's just horrible. And that was something she was introduced to in the life, along with cocaine and heroin. And it's just a way to stay numb. And I knew from all of that research that Lex couldn't stay numb and heal. And so I wanted her to be aware of that and to still have enough of herself left in there. Because if you watch the I Am Jane Doe, there are a couple of the girls, a couple of the survivors in there that definitely had a little bit of, definitely inspired a little bit of Lex too, and the fact that they wanted to be better. And I don't mean better as in good. I mean, they wanted to be better as in they wanted to heal. And you have to want that in order for it to even happen. So I knew if Lex's book was going to be, or her story was going to be at all authentic, with giving her like all the great people and the sweet puppy, but she needed to make that decision herself that she needed to be better. So that she wanted to be better, that she wanted to heal. So that along with that came the decision for her that she knew she couldn't use.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm passing it back to Isabella now.
Yeah, so my question is very different. I mean, as a bookseller, I love to ask this question, and just about books. And we've kind of been asking it to, all of our authors. And that is sort of, what books have you been reading recently that you've loved, particularly if they're YA, but any books in general? What have you been reading during quarantine? What are you reading now? And then
6 started that I haven't finished. I've got research stuff. I've got all kinds of things. Earlier this year, I read Jane Anonymous by Lori Farias-Stolars. Have you read it?
No, I know it because it's from Wednesday Books too.
It's trippy. Yeah, I really, really enjoyed that one. I started reading Ninth House by Verdugo. So I've got that on the go. I'm reading Full Disclosure by Cameron Garrett. Have you read that one?
Yeah, I know that one.
I love it because, so often when we're faced with HIV, we look at it and it's somebody who's gotten it, right? Like they've become infected. And the fact that she was writing a character that had been born with it and had just had to live her whole life with it. And it's such a heavy topic, but she's got such beautiful moments of levity and just being this normal kid and doing silly, ridiculous things with your silly, ridiculous girlfriends, yeah, I can't rave about that one enough. What else have I got going on? There's just so many. Oh, I'm reading a book about Madame Restel, who was, she was an abortionist in 19th century New York, she was like one of the richest women in New York. I'm reading a biography on her. I'm reading Frankenstein again for inspiration, because for a side project I'm working on. Yeah, and I think that's it for books. But I have do you know what's been great about the quarantine? And I don't care if people think Amazon's an evil dragon or whatever. I mean, yes, they are, but still they have cheap books. I was on there with my Kindle, and publishers have been doing so many book sales, especially early in quarantine, that I now have a to be read list of probably like 50 or 60 books or more that I was able to pick up for $1.99, or it's just been ridiculous. The quarantine has at least been awesome for my book buying habit.
Yeah. And are there any particular books that, for readers, like me and Leah, who loved What Unbreakable Looks Like, are there any books that particularly you would recommend, like, if you like this, try this type thing?
Well, because I haven't read too many, in fact, I haven't read any books about anybody who's been trafficked. And so if you know of any good books about people who've been trafficked, please let me know. But you've probably already read them. You guys are like incredibly well read. I loved, again, Jane Anonymous, Sadie by Courtney Summers, The Gracier by Kim Liggett. Who else? I'm very much into Dangerous Girls right now. Wilder Girls, Rory Power. And actually, I should do this up, but I have a book that was actually published by Harlequin Teen a few years ago, and it's called Vigilante, and it's under the name Katie Cross. And I will pitch it because it's about a girl whose friend was assaulted by a group of boys and then later committed suicide, and then the friend becomes, a vigilante and goes after them one by one. So if you like really, kind of edgy girls, again, like I said, as I get older, I'm getting angrier. Like right now I am loving, like if somebody would actually let me write just like a murderous teenage girl, I would
go for it.
But I would really just, when people say that whole, like, if you could go back and know what you know now, would you go back to being a teenager? And I'm like, they'd put me in prison. Because if I went back to being a teenager now, some guys would get seriously messed up. So, no, I wouldn't do it. And I shouldn't incriminate myself on camera like that. But, so those are just a few of the, and I guess what those all have in common are girls that go through something of a personal or physical / personal nature that transforms them, that tries to break them, but they come out stronger for it, I think.
Yeah.
And so really quickly before our last question, that is about trafficking, going back to Rachel Lloyd. I recently read her memoir, Girls Like Us, and it's really fantastic. It is a memoir, so it's not a novel or fiction. It's based on her experiences, both her experiences in the sex trafficking, like being sex trafficked and in the sex industry, as well as her experiences starting GEMS, which is her nonprofit organization.
I actually have it upstairs in my library, but I forgot to, I wasn't even thinking, I was just thinking fiction. Yeah, that's a very good one.
It's really good. And so finally we come to the last question that you've been teasing us about the whole night. And it's, what projects are you working on?
And is it with Wednesday Books?
Well, yes. Okay. So as it stands right now, my second book with Wednesday comes out sometime next year. And that is what
bugging Vicky about it.
It's what I've been calling the DID book, and that is so right now the working title is called "It's Pieces of Me," but that could change because What Unbreakable Looks Like was not. Oh, Mick, What Unbreakable Looks Like was not originally called What Unbreakable Looks Like. So the title could change, but it is about a young woman who discovers that she has dissociative identity disorder, and coming to terms with her past and what happened. And then I'm hoping that Wednesday will want the book I'm working on about a young woman who finds out that her father was basically a Ted Bundy type serial killer. And I'm also toying with self-publishing some stuff. I have an idea for a Victorian set almost kind of gothic-y thing where a young governess is hired by this guy in a remote Yorkshire village. And anyway, it's not a child that she's a governess to, it's his Frankenstein-like creation that she's supposed to be the governess for.
That sounds amazing, and I really hope that you do that.
One of my favorite things sort of about, reading so many books and, working with publishers is that, you start to find the imprints that publish the stories that you love most. And then more often than not.
Amazing. And I'm not even saying that because I write for them. Like, they're, like, I feel so, and Megan's listening. I'm not just saying this because Megan's listening. I feel so lucky to be with them because they just put out some amazing books, but not just that, they're just a joy to work with.
Yes, we feel the same way.
Because let me tell you, and I don't mean to spill any tea, but I've written over and published over 50 books under different names, and I've written for all the big five. And yeah, they're I say it unbiasedly, they're one of my favorites. Like, I've just never been treated with this much just respect and consideration for the publisher. Yeah. So they make it a real joy. So they, it's great because of course they make you want to write books for them, right? And they make you do your best work too.
Yeah, one thing I always find is that, chances are if you read a book that you love, chances are that the editor who had acquired that book is also the person who's written some other books that you love. And it was actually your editor, Vicky, who sent your book to me. And, she's worked on so many of my favorite books. And it's just so amazing to
really love her. To a point where I think she might be considering a restraining order because she's just, like, I occasionally send her Christmas presents for her cat, that kind of like, she's just darling and genuine and just a real pleasure to work with. So when you're somebody who has these people in your head, like, I am not somebody who functions well in the real world. I hate to say that, but I mean, when you've got all this and you've got these ideas, like, I spent, even when I was younger, and I did have jobs in the real world, and I would spend 90% of my time wondering about people that, would come in. And I used to work, I'm dating myself here, but back in the day when people actually took pictures on cameras that required film, when I was very young, I used to work in a photo finishing place. And that's not a place to work if you're somebody who has a very vivid imagination, because then all of a sudden you've got people's lives spread out before you. And for that very reason, I refused to watch the movie 1 Hour Photo that Robin Williams was in, because I know that could happen. So never going to do it. But there were people that I saw them get married and like saw the birth of their first kid and saw the kids growing up. And, it just opens up. I actually did start a short story one time, or a novella, because I was very interested. I wanted to write something set in the 80s, like late 80s, where somebody worked at a photo finishing place like that and started having a serial killer bring her film and dropping it off. Because I thought, wouldn't that be creepy? You're working, I know you guys are too young for this, but they used to have like little huts and like parking lots where people would be developing pictures and you could go and pick up your photos. And I'm like, can you imagine some like 18-year-old girl working alone at night in one of those huts? And then she's developing pictures and she starts to get like, right? Like, from a killer? Like, isn't that awesome? And, no, it's not awesome. In my case, it was awesome. But yeah. So anyway, I've talked way too much. It's been an hour.
No, well, that was our final question.
You want to talk to me again?
Quickly. Kate's book, What Unbreakable Looks Like, is out now. You can pick it up at the store, or you can order it on our website, buffalostreetbooks.com. And we really hope that if you haven't already picked up a copy, you will do so. It's one of my favorite books of the year, and it's such an important read.
Thanks so much to me.
And another reminder that this is a part of our week of YA virtual events. So we hope to see you here tomorrow for our event with Cameron Lund, who is the author of a very different book, but a rom-com. And
delightful. She seems like a real sweetheart too. I've gotten to know her good on Instagram.
Yeah. Another book that deals with it's a rom-com, but it's another book that deals with a subject, something that faces a lot of teen girls and boys today. And just a reminder that if you want to take advantage of purchasing all 7 of the books, including What Unbreakable Looks Like, that are featured during this week, you are eligible for a 15% discount. And I think
awesome.
that about covers it. Leah, do you have anything else?
I just want to really quickly plug, I don't know if plug is the right word, but the Advocacy Center's website is, I'm blanking on what it is, even though I should really know it, is actompkins.org. Okay, I was right. And if anybody ever does need any help, the Advocacy Center has a hotline that is very visible on the website, and I love working there. So
That's fabulous, and thank you, and Lynn and anyone else that's here from the Advocacy Center. Like, thank you so much for dedicating yourself to helping these people, these kids, because it's just, we need all the people we can get doing all that we can do to fight this. It's just it's a blight on society, and it's an industry that is not going away anytime soon. So we need to we need to fight it.
Yeah. And thank you so much, Kate. This was so wonderful.
Yeah, well, it was absolutely such a wonderful
conversation. Say, if you don't mind, anybody who does buy my book through you guys, if they send me an email and tell me, send me an email at katewriter@gmail.com. And if you buy the book from Buffalo Street Books, I will send you a signed book plate to put in it.
Ooh, awesome.
That's a really good deal.
Yes, very, very good deal.
It cost me a stamp. That's it. So
I mean, this book also, it does deal with a difficult subject matter, but if you're not ready to read it, or if you know someone who would enjoy this book, even if you're not purchase it for anyone, if it's not for yourself, again, I've read it twice in the past 3 months, and it gets better and better each time.
much.
And yeah, Kate, if you want to stay on for a couple minutes, I have one question for you. But I think that about covers everything today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.
Thank you so much for being here and for talking about, your writing process, of course, but just really talking about an issue that faces girls and boys, but mostly girls, and that people in America forget happens right under their nose.
And if you don't mind me throwing this in, and it's not an aside, and I don't mean to just throw it in, but we were talking on the topic of race. Yes, I did choose to make Lex white because I'm white, but something that I'm very passionate about is the fact that it is a racial issue also in this country. 40% of girls who are trafficked are Black, and something really needs to be done. It's horrible. I think another 20% are other people of color, and then something like 20% are white or something like that. But we really need to do a better job of protecting our girls.
Yeah, definitely. And I hope that that more people will pick up this book, and that it'll also find its way into the hands of those who need it. I was very moved by what you said about how you wrote it for her.
Oh yeah, and she drives me crazy, and I've probably got 6 messages from her right now. But I love her.
Yeah. So yeah, please purchase this book. It's incredible. If you haven't already. All right, bye everyone.
Bye. Thank you all.